first time the sirens clawed at the night. It sounded like the city itself was screaming for help. And every porch light on the block blinked awake in the same shivering breath. That's when the fear started to taste like metal, sharp on the tongue, cold in the teeth, long before the first face vanished, long before the police tape turned the sidewalks into stitched wounds. It was the way the street fell quiet afterward, like something was listening from the dark, like something was waiting for a name to call. My name is Eli, and I used to think I knew what this place was made of. Kids on scooters, dogs gnawing the same dirty tennis balls, Mrs. Darling's sunburned hydrangeas, the clack of coffee mugs on railings every morning. Then the flyers started. Have you seen? Stapled crooked to poles, the faces smiling, because they didn't know this was the picture we'd show the world when they stopped coming home. The word missing does not describe absence. It describes a weight, the exact shape of a person pressing against a door that won't open. I wanted the old noise back, the trash truck groan, the rattled screen doors, the dumb arguments about parking, normality's choir that tells the nervous system, still alive, still home. That was the intention beating inside my throat. Bring them back, restore the street, make the night ordinary again, like rewinding a film, until the sound of laughter reappears in the audio track. But the obstacle introduced itself one midnight as a song so soft it could have been imagined. A flute far away, threading the air like silk pulled through a needle. Before that, though, there was a smaller omen. The rats, they surged like gray rain over the alley dumpsters. A fever of tiny bodies that chewed wiring, gnawed garden hoses, and nickered in the walls with a wet, papery hiss. A city team came, measured, shrugged, promised, left. The rats thinned as if evacuated by an announcement I hadn't heard, and the neighborhood applauded the return of quiet. But when quiet comes too clean, it's not peace, it's a silenced witness. Then, in a flurry of days, the pets began slipping away, collars left in grass like rings at the bottom of baths, leashes coiled on hooks like shed snakes, followed by people. First one, then two, then six. I kept count like it would help, as if the numbers themselves formed a bridge back to them. And every morning, I told myself the same sentence. Today, I will find a thread and pull, and the dark will tear open. That's when I first heard it, 3 clear notes, climbing a spine of air from the park's edge. And my bones answered with a tremble. I could not stop. It was a cloudy night, the kind that turns the sky into a low ceiling. The street lamps wore halos, and the pavement shone like a held breath. On my porch, the wind chimes I never remembered buying winked softly, their tiny tubes carved with loops and leaves, whispering against each other like teeth. Their sound nuzzled up to the flute until I could not tell where one ended and the other began. And I had the sick feeling they shared a melody, the way a wound shares heat with a fever. Sam, my partner, came to the door in a sweatshirt hanging off one shoulder, rubbing sleep from her eyes, the way a child rubs out a bad dream. She asked me if I heard it, and I lied, because the sound already knew my name, and I didn't want it to know hers. But she tilted her head and hummed along. Not a tune I recognized, not a tune anyone could, unless it was written in the same place her breath was made. Intention versus obstacle bring her back inside. Keep the house lit. Keep the windows closed. Keep our feet on the good floorboards where coffee spills and sun lands in stripes. But the song is a tide, and the body is a shoreline. The sweetest things the world makes are also the most patient. From the park, the flute braided through the trees, carrying smells of damp bark and rust, and something sweet-rotten, like fruit left in a warm car across the street. Old Mr. Lang opened his door with a look that said he'd been waiting for a knock that never came. He stepped out in socks, holding his wrist as if it ached, and turned toward the park without ever looking down. Mrs. Darling's hydrangeas flickered as someone brushed them, and the wind chimes on her porch chimed in nervous agreement. The chimes were multiplying on porches like tiny shrines, bone pale, stained tea brown. Some dyed the soft purple of bruises, each carved with shapes that stole the eye without giving it back. People said they were handmade, organic, the words we use when we can't admit we're talking about remains. I reached out to still mine, and they were warm, as if they'd been held. The flute changed then, sadder, lower, and the entire block seemed to sway in place, the way tall grasses move when a train passes, like something huge had crossed our path without touching us. The breath in my lungs remembered the ocean, though I have never lived near one. The skin on my arms remembered winter, though it was June. Sam's humming deepened to a hum that carries inside it another voice, and I knew, the way you know a glass will shatter before it falls, that I had already waited too long. I called her name, and she didn't flinch. I touched her wrist, and her pulse was a metronome ticking for someone else. The intention, keep her, ran into an obstacle I could not see. A melody older than fences, older than our words for fear. When she stepped past me, it was with the gentlest smile I've ever seen on her, and it broke my heart because it meant she believed she was walking toward safety. I followed into the street barefoot, the pavement cool and pebbled, the air damp, the maples rattling their leaves in a warning they couldn't phrase. A small parade formed without speaking. Mr. Lang, the Christensen twins in pajamas, Miss Ortiz from the corner with her hair scarfed, and Sam among them, hands down at her sides like a sleepwalker's. The wind chimes all the way down the block answered with a thin keening, like teeth tapping a glass. At the edge of the park, the flute emerged from shadow and found a shape. A thin figure in a long coat, posture straight as a yardstick, hair pinned in a way no one wears anymore. The face looked like it had remembered youth recently, and the smile did not belong to the eyes. The song paused, the crickets paused with it, and every porch light on the block flickered. A nervous system misfiring, not pests, the figure said softly, to no one and everyone at once. Offerings. And the chimes on our porches rang once, in perfect unison, as if agreeing to a contract I hadn't signed. Open loop, Sam did not look back, and the music started again, threading us forward through trees that leaned in like eavesdroppers. The rest is a path made of wrists and ankles and breath, and the stubborn need to keep what loves us, even when something older, something patient, plays a song that says, "Give them to me." I followed, bare feet in damp grass, into a night that tasted like a promise and a dare. The path through the park doesn't exist in daylight, but at night it rises underfoot like veins surfacing under thin skin. We moved along it as if the ground had tilted, as if our bones were marbles rolling to a drain, and the trees crowded close, their bark shiny with damp like the hides of animals. The flute was no longer far. It was in the same air my mouth used, so every breath felt like drinking from someone else's glass. I kept speaking Sam's name as if it were chalk on a door frame, the way people mark the growth of children, hoping each repetition would measure how far she'd gone, and tell me where to cut the wood to frame her back in, her shoulders lifted like she was listening to some other pronunciation of her name, one I could not make even with love as leverage. Mr. Lang tripped and did not catch himself, and the thin figure in the coat did not turn. But the song dipped, and Mr. Lang rose, dust on his lips like sugar. We were not the only ones. The trail stitched itself to feeders from 3 more streets, and a low crowd assembled without voices, the hush of people whose bodies had been barbed. There were dogs too, and cats, and the hollow-eyed tuxedo cat from Mrs. Chu's stoop, whose bell stayed silent now when it moved. The intention paled next to the obstacle in that forest. What do you do when the thing you love walks willingly into a promise you cannot see? How do you pull someone back without tearing them? The coat-slim figure played, and we obeyed, and I understood something I didn't want to. Consent can be stolen. The body can be convinced. At a low place in the woods, the trees stood in a ring like a family having an argument, it has said before. The ground was damp and giving, the air humored by gnats, the smell of river mud with the iron lick of blood hidden inside it. This was where the wind chimes grew their cousins, their parents' bones threaded and lacquered and carved, dangling from branch tips like pale seed pods. I touched one light as a promise, hollow as a cough, and it made no sound, as if sound were a favor it would not grant me. My palm came away with a faint dust, fine as flour, fine as ash. I wanted to wipe it on my jeans, but some part of me believed if I did, I'd wear those carvings into my skin and never be clean again. The figure stepped into the ring, lifted the flute, and the earth answered. The ground softened around our ankles, not sank, softened, as though a hand beneath the dirt cupped our feet and waited, those already too close. An old woman in a peach robe, a teenager in a team hoodie, Mr. Lang, went to their knees with gratitude and slid their feet into holes as if into slippers. "Roots," said the flautist, the coat-lilt smile widening. "It is right to give the ground back what it gave." Sam looked at me then for the first time since the porch, and her expression broke me with its quiet apology. There was no fear there, only a soft relief, like someone who has been lost for hours and finally recognizes a corner store. When her soles found the holes that matched the size of her feet too perfectly to be chance, she exhaled like a swimmer touching tile. I moved without thinking, hands out, trying to snag her elbow, to yank before the earth could decide, and the flautist lowered the instrument half an inch. It was enough. The ground clenched. Sam gasped, and I heard it, the sound of ankle bones kissing soil with a wet press, the suction of mud making itself a glove. "Stop," I whispered to the ground, as if it obeyed pleas. "Stop," I said to the air, because it was the same air the flute used. Hands grabbed my shoulders from behind, strong fingers anchoring me, and I twisted, expecting to see a neighbor, to see help. The hands were attached to a woman I didn't recognize, eyes white in a way that wasn't blindness. The whites were too bright, too full, like milk scalded in a pan. Her smile was a child's smile drawn by someone who has never met a child. "Offerings," she murmured in a voice that carried 3 other voices inside it like coins in a pocket. "What we take, we return." "I haven't taken anything," I said, the kind of lie you only hear your mouth making after you've made it. She cocked her head, and behind me, Sam said my name like she was learning it again. In the circle, more feet found holes, more bodies stacked their weight over their roots, and the wind moved through the bone chimes, above with the frailest giggle. Obstacles multiply. The song is 1, the ground is 2, the stranger's hands are 3, fear is 4, because it makes your muscles soft. The intention does not get louder to match. It has to get clearer. Bring her back, not later. Now, I tried to break the song with noise, shouting, clapping, metal on metal, using my keys. But the flute doesn't compete. It incorporates. My clatter fell into its timing, until I felt like I was a percussionist in an orchestra I hated, playing correctly against my will. The stranger's grip pinched nerves in my neck, and I almost cried from the familiarity of it. The way grown-ups steer children by the elbow through stores. Then, clumsy, blessed motion at the edge of the ring. A boy in a torn jacket stumbled forward, his feet not yet buried, his face messy with tears and mud. He cut across the circle toward the flautist, arms out like he meant to hug her, and for a second her eyes softened, or pretended to. He snatched at the flute. The sound that broke wasn't music. It was the air itself crying out the way people do when they've dropped a casserole at a funeral. The boy's fingers grazed the flute, and I saw his nails go gray, as if they'd been dipped in something metallic. His knuckles puckered white, and he yelped and recoiled. The flautist's smile snapped back into place, and she touched his forehead with the instrument as lightly as a parent would. He slept instantly, folding straight down like a puppet whose strings were cut. The holes took his feet as if catching a dear friend. That was when the other sound arrived, the one that lives under songs, like a river lives under ice. The wind deepened. The leaves turned their silver undersides and flickered. There is a point at which a forest stops being a place and becomes a body. We had crossed it. Branches at the edge of the ring rippled without wind, and shapes unstitched from shadow the way oil unthreads itself in water, blunt, glistening darkness, folding and unfolding without edges. Their smell was the smell of overheated wires and burned hair and pennies held too long. They moved toward anyone whose feet were not yet in holes. The stranger behind me leaned to my ear. "Roots," she breathed, and the word was sopping. It dripped down my spine. Or sacrifice. I thought then, stupid, human, stubborn of the way Sam laughs when she drops blueberries and they scatter, of the pucker on her left shoulder from a camping burn when she was 12, of the way she sings commercials ironically when she's too tired to sleep, the intention sharpened like a knife, finally on the stone. I am not leaving without you. I went for the chimes. If the song had a mouth, the chimes were its teeth. I leapt and ripped a strand of bone tubes down, carving etched spirals into my palm. They were light, shockingly fragile. The flautist paused, just the width of a blink. I threw the chimes to the ground and stamped, and they crunched like hard candies. The forest inhaled. The creature's edges fuzzed. The holes at Sam's feet loosened enough for her to wobble. I seized her waist and pulled as if dragging a drowning swimmer, and she cried out, not in pain, but in mournful complaint, like I was taking away something that had finally quieted the noise in her head. The flautist raised the instrument, and I knew the next phrase would be the kind that unspools the spine from the skull. But another sound reached us first, a second flute, thin and breathless, imperfect, like someone learning how to make a throat out of metal. It came from the dark beyond the ring, and carried in it a reckless human thing. It was trying. The two songs collided, perfect and imperfect, and for a heartbeat, the air turned to glass. Everything that had been moving hung suspended inside it, like hair in a shower droplet. Sam's weight lurched free. I fell backward with her, both of us muddy to the ribs, and the stranger's hand finally missed me. I didn't look back. I rolled, I ran. I carried more than I weighed, and the path back to the street rose up under us like a muscle flexing to help. I did not reach the houses. A boy with mud on his face, the same who had grabbed the flute, stood in the path with eyes too old for his skin. "It follows," he said, voice hoarse, with the kind of sleep you get from magic. "It follows when you break it." Behind us, the chimes on every branch rang not from wind, but from breath. The street beyond the trees shivered like a mirage, and from the dark, the second flute stumbled through a note like a runner who trips and keeps going anyway. We were not out. We had only been noticed. The block had the look of a family pretending not to fight in public, stoops tidy. Cars straight in their lines, windows bright, while a tremor ran under the concrete, like a parent's held breath. I dragged Sam to the porch, and she sat without looking at the door, eyes turned toward the trees, as if the horizon had leaned closer and asked to be kissed. The wind chimes above us pulsed with a sound that wasn't sound, a pressure in the gums, the way a thunderstorm announces itself in your fillings. I cut them down. Hands shaking, I reached and snapped the thin cords and gathered the carved tubes in my shirt like fruit. They were warm again. The carvings wormed under the skin of my wrists with an itching that promised to become a map if I let it. I dumped the chimes on the welcome mat and stepped on them until the bones gave, and a smell rose like burned sugar and nail polish. A door slammed across the street. Mr. Lang's house, empty 5 minutes ago, spat yellow light and a shadow into the yard. His niece, maybe. I'd seen her once, who stared at the park with a face that recognized an old debt. "You can't just break them," she said, voice flat as a yard of ribbon. "You have to burn the song." I laughed because there was a laugh inside me that didn't know what else to do. "How do you burn a song?" I asked, without burning the one playing it. She didn't answer. She looked at Sam, who swayed even seated, and said softly, "Roots are kinder than policy." Then she turned and went back inside, and the porch light died. Sam's hand groped for mine. It was cold, wet with something that wasn't rain. "I'm so tired," she said, and the words were a breath on glass. They faded as soon as they existed. I pressed her hand to my chest. To a heartbeat, I willed loud enough to be a metronome. My phone exploded in my pocket with messages like hailstones. "Have you seen Noah? The police say wait. Don't wait. Are the chimes new on your porch? The mayor says stay inside. No one is inside." The neighborhood app vibrated with advice that sounded like folk magic, and HOA bylaws had a child. Someone posted, "Take down the chimes." Another, "Leave offerings of milk." Another, "Do not say your name out loud after midnight." A new post pinned itself at the top. Found this. A video. The park, daylight. A ring of holes like gopher work, only neat. Each perfectly foot-shaped. Each with a pale stain around its rim. The caption, "They're making places for us." The second flute skittered in the distance, coming closer. Notes like a person tripping up stairs and refusing to fall. The main flute, the coat, the cologne of pennies and singe waited. The chimes on the block churred with impatience. I locked our door. I closed our windows. I sealed the mail slot with tape like hurricanes do. It's ridiculous, the rituals we invent to make fear feel manageable. They're still rituals. In the kitchen, I ran the tap until it was cold as a mouthful of winter, and poured Sam a glass she didn't drink. "You hear it?" I asked, uselessly. Is it better than me?" She smiled like she does when the cat brings us a dead moth, and we pretend to clap for him. "It's not better," she said, words slow, sweet as if to a hurt child. Its older, our cat, Juniper, stood at the sliding door and hissed at nothing I could see. Her tail was a bottle brush. Her pupils were the size of mistakes. I lifted her and pressed my face to the place behind her ear that always smells like corn chips. Not you, I said into her fur, as if the night was taking requests. The second flute landed on our block at last, and it had lungs of desperation. The melody caught on its own teeth and bled, but it pushed on, a human trying to answer a language test in a foreign alphabet. It stood at the curb, and I opened the door before I remembered I had locked it. She was younger than me, hair up in a way that made her look more fragile than she was, palms nicked and stained with dye the color of old bruises. The flute in her hands was wrong, not fine, not lacquered, not holy. This one was wood stripped and sanded and stained, the mouthpiece bandaged in tape like an athlete's finger. Her eyes were rimmed red, and she smelled faintly of burned lacquer and citrus. "I'm Mara," she said, and her voice had the flat rattle of someone who has cried into a towel to save the neighbors from knowing. I made the chimes because she told me to. I played because she told me to. I can't stop her alone. "Who is she?" I asked, though the answer stood in the park like a lighthouse. "The one in the coat. She is the woman whose house has always been here," Mara said, eyes flicking over my shoulder to the chimes I'd crushed. "And she isn't the woman whose house has always been here." She passed me the second flute, like passing a hot pan to someone who doesn't realize its weight. If both of us play, sometimes the song forgets which way to go. My mouth flooded with the taste of pennies. "I don't know how. No one does," she said. "That's the trick. It teaches you so it can use you. Intention, keep Sam. Obstacle, everything. Solution, make a louder everything." We went back onto the porch. The block was a dream of a block, quiet, lit, tidy, waiting to be ruined or saved. Mara lifted her flute. I lifted mine. She nodded like she was telling a horse to trust the bridge. We played, or the flutes did through us. The first breath was a choke, then a thin line, then a strand that thickened the way worry thickens into action. Across the grass, the coat lifted her instrument and smiled, and the smile made my tongue go numb. Two songs met over our roofs, and the air caught them like mittened hands catch falling dishes. The chimes on 100 porches quivered, then slowed, then stopped, as if listening like polite dinner guests. In that held moment, I saw into the coat's face as if through fog, and what looked back was old in the way a riverbed is old. The eyes were bright as polished bone. "Return," she said, though her mouth did not move. "You are standing in borrowed time." Mara's song shook. Mine reached for hers like two hands meeting in a movie before a train passes between them. Sam's head tilted, and for one breath the longing drained from her face and left her blank as a room after a party. "Sam," I said into the music like a secret, "come back to the part where the light collects on the countertop at 5 p.m. please." Her eyes found me. A line ran through the air between us, a leash made of attention. The coat watched with a tenderness that felt like sarcasm. From the end of the block, 3 shadows unstitched from the gutter and came down the street as if the asphalt were a river and they were boats. The smell preceded them, the lights flickered, the music buckled. They turned up our walk with the intention of a tax collector. Mara's elbow brushed mine. "Salt," she whispered out of the side of her mouth. Edges hate salt. I did not own a line of salt for the threshold, except in stories. But there was a bag of cheap pretzels on the counter in a clip. I ran, ripped it open, crushed them under the heel of my palm, sprinkled the dust across the top step like a ridiculous priest. The shadows slowed, edges furred. "Keep playing," Mara said, and there was authority in it. "You have to decide for her just this once, or the ground will." Sam stood. Her bare feet were filthy. A smear of green across her shin looked like meadow, looked like bruise. She took 1 step toward the porch steps, 1 toward the street. A metronome caught between tempos. "Please," I said, my lips on the flute, the taste of iron and spit. The coat lifted her instrument and slid into a phrase that tasted like pomegranate seeds, sweet, red, bitter if you bite too hard. My knees wobbled with a desire that didn't belong to me. Sam swayed toward her. Mara stopped playing long enough to yank the chime's broken chords off our porch with one hand, the other still making a breath for the flute. She flicked the broken chords at the nearest shadow like a snake, and it recoiled with a sound like a record reversing. The block held its breath. 3 houses down, a child cried, "Mom," and the sound skittered across the porches like a leaf. From the park, the coat's eyes brightened, and a 4th shadow pulled itself loose from a hedge with the patience of sap. "Burn them," Mara said, nodding at the pile of crushed bones at my feet. When the teeth break, the mouth forgets the shape of the word. I looked at Sam. I looked at the pile. I looked at the block that had raised itself around us for years, like a body that had grown around a splinter, until the splinter felt necessary. I thought of Mr. Lang, of the boy with the mud, of every face on every flyer. "I'll burn them," I said, "but after I get her inside." The coat smiled again, patient as geology. "We will wait," she said without lips. "Waiting is what we are made of." I reached for Sam's wrist. She reached back. The porch light above us went out, and the night leaned forward to listen. We didn't make it through the doorway the first time. That's the thing about thresholds. They are the favorite food of old rules. Sam stepped onto the salt pretzel dust and shivered like someone had walked over her grave. My grip faltered when the temperature dropped through the railing into my bones, with a sensation like teeth aching from ice water. Mara's flute squeaked. The coats did not. From the street, the shadows pooled at the curb, as if respecting a property line they intended to redraw later. They were patient, black not like lack, but like a different kind of presence, like ocean at night. The block's chimes gave a tiny, collective hiccup, as if something had made them laugh. Eli Sam said, voice gentle, and the syllable cracked on the L like a dropped egg. It's easier there. Easier isn't better, I said, and it sounded like a slogan on a mug. She smiled a little, sadness wearing her face like a coat that fits too well. In the park, a small fire kindled with no wood and no smoke. The light was meat-colored, dark, and red, like sunset through closed lids. The coat raised the flute for a new movement, and the grass leaned toward it. The hole in me that fear had hollowed pressed to the music like a moth presses to glass. Door, Mara said, breathless around her mouthpiece. Char it. What? Make it black, she said. Make it old. Make it look like it has been here forever. It was nonsense until it wasn't. How do you tell a song that a doorway is not a doorway, but a gate with a memory older than it? You let the smoke teach the wood a new truth. In the kitchen, I lit the back burner and blackened a thin dish towel, the smell of scorched cotton turning the air bitter. I fanned the smoke into the door frame, smeared the soot into the grain with my fingers until the white paint dulled and then smudged. I drew the shape of the carving I had seen on the chimes, loops, leaves, spirals, but wrong, reversed. The way you draw on a steamed mirror, and the letters are written backward. Mara played. The coat played. Sam watched me with the tolerant focus of someone giving permission to a stranger to fix their collar. I whispered her name in the smoke, because smoke remembers mouths. Inside, I said, and this time when she stepped, the house said yes. Her foot crossed the line, and she sighed like sleep after coughing. The shadows of the curb pushed forward and hit something I could not see, and rippled like cloth in a wind I could not feel. I pulled her over the threshold and closed the door and leaned my forehead on the wood as if to listen to a baby breathing. The house creaked the way houses creak when they rub their bones together. And remember, they were once trees. Mara stumbled inside through the deadbolt and slid down the wall to sit on the mat with the crushed chimes. She was crying without sound, tears slicking her face like oil. I didn't mean to make them, she said. I didn't know what they were until they were already talking. It's not on you, I said, and it was a half-truth. I brought her water. I brought Sam a blanket. I brought myself a lie, that we were safe because I had closed a door. We burned the chimes in a metal mixing bowl out back on the grill. They burned too eagerly, with the quick greed of hair catching, and the smoke had a weight to it. It fell instead of rose, pooling on the deck like fog in a bottle. The carvings flared blue at the edges and then went to salt. While they burned, my phone filled with messages from neighbors, strangers, the city. The app declared a temporary curfew, as if time were a teenager who'd sneaked out and just needed firm rules. A voice message from a number I didn't know played in my ear. A slow breath in, then 3 notes on a flute, then the sound of something small hitting a wall. We made a plan because the body needs a plan to make adrenaline into movement. Burn the chimes, house by house. Keep the doors charred, the thresholds salted, the windows written backward leaves. When the park quiets, go back for the ones rooted there. Bring cutters, shovels, ropes, names. Sam slept on the couch, hands open on her chest like a child trusting. She twitched when the coat played. She softened when Mara did. I watched her breathe and counted 7, 7, 8, the way she always has. Except now I knew the numbers and wished I didn't. At 3, the park laughed. Not a human laugh, something larger. Wind through pipe organs of bone. The chimes on the block answered. The ones not yet burned, with a titter that made my throat close. The shadows at the curb turned their faces to our house like wolves considering a fence. Mara stood. She's getting ready, she said. Dawn makes it easier for her. Things that grow like dawn. I thought of the hydrangeas, of the kids chalking suns on the sidewalk, of the way light comes through our bedroom blinds as a ladder. It felt like betrayal. We have until first birds, Mara said. After that, she asks the ground to open, and it will. I kissed Sam's temple, and she smiled in her sleep, and the smile killed me. Stay, I whispered, as if the word itself were a glue. Then I picked up a lighter, a bag of kosher salt, a roll of twine, and the wrong flute. And we stepped back into a night that was almost done being night. The block met us with eyes. People peered through curtains, as if afraid of being counted by something that wanted to count them. I knocked. They opened. We took down their chimes. They're organic. The words stuck like a burr, and burned them in kitchen sinks, on cookie sheets, in coffee cans. We smeared soot on wood and drew backward leaves until our fingers were black. The coat watched from the park, not moving, the flute at rest against her mouth, like a promise she could play any second. Her patience was its own threat. Her eyes were bright as new pennies in a child's palm. By the time the birds in the ginkgo decided it was morning, we had a ring of houses breathing different. The block felt heavier, as if the ground had sat down. The shadows at the curb were thinner, as if they were hungry. We weren't done. We were only louder. Dawn is the hour for vows, and for lies. We made both. We go back, I said, and the word back meant something different now. It meant into a mouth. We bring them out, and we salt the ground, and we burn the song in the place it was born. We gathered what the body thinks is useful when it is scared. Ropes, shovels, bolt cutters, thermoses. A photo of a face you love that you can hold up at the bad thing and say, "This is mine." We put salt in the cuffs of our jeans, wrote backward leaves on our wrists in ash. The boy with the mud on his face joined us without asking, his eyes still old. "Names," Mara said, and made us say them. We said the names of the ones rooted in the circle like counting. Makes a spell in fairy tales. We said the name of the coat woman last, and the way the air flexed on the consonants told me saying it was both invitation and defense. The park welcomed us like a lobby welcomes guests, polite, bright, cold. The ring had not moved, though the holes were deeper. A dampness clung to the ground, like breath on glass. The chimes in the branches were fewer because we had burned them, but the ones remaining had matured, if that is a word you can use for bone. They were darker now, their carvings full of blue shadow, their chords slick as tongues when the wind fingered them. They sang not a note, but the shape of a note, like the outline a hand leaves on a table after it is gone. Our people stood in the circle with eyes open, bodies still as if they were hiding from a hunter. Their feet were ankle deep, shin deep, knee deep, depending on how long they'd been here. And the ground held them the way a good chair holds a tired back. When they saw us, a small noise rose from them, a noise like trying to cry with your mouth closed. The coat stood at the far side of the circle like an altar you can move. In the gray light, her youth looked like a trick of distance. Her edges were a watercolor drying. Mara lifted her flute, and the coat lifted hers, and the boy with the mud stepped between them with the courage that only comes to those who have been ruined and stand up anyway. He held a hand out, not to grab but to offer, as if he had remembered something else the song could be used for. "Please," he said, and the please landed like a coin in a fountain. "We have to put it down." The coat smiled in a way that made my teeth ache. "Put down what you cannot carry." "The flute," he said. He pointed at Mara's, then at hers. "They want to be together." They did. You could feel it. The wrong flute in my hands quivered slightly, like a live thing hearing its nest. Mara's flute warmed against her fingers. The coat's flute looked like it had been carved from a bone without asking the bone's permission. Intention, end it. Obstacle, ending, is another word for feeding if you're not careful. We moved carefully. Not closer, not yet, but parallel, like dancers learning a step. The chimes shivered, and the shadows at the tree line gathered without stepping forward. The way cats gather near a glass they know will tip. The ground listened. "Names," Mara said again, and we said them until the air tasted like copper. We said Sam's, Mr. Lang's, the boy's if he would let us, which he did not. So we called him the boy with the mud, and that was his name. The coat's mouth did not move, but the corners of her eyes pinched as if someone had whispered a joke she liked. We threw salt. It struck the holes and made a soft crackle. We cut at the dirt around ankles with a trowel, and the ground said no like a mother taking a candy from a toddler. We looped ropes around waists and pulled, and the ground loosened like a fist, thinking about forgiveness. Sam's foot came free first, one, then the other, with a pop that made my stomach flood with cold. Her soles were pale and prunny, bloodless as if she had been in the bath too long. She fell forward into me with a sound like a bird flying into glass. Around the ring, 2 more bodies came free. One went deeper, and one cried out a name that wasn't ours. The coat's eyes brightened. "Roots break hearts more gently than blades," she said, and the second flute hiccuped on a breath. The boy with the mud stepped closer to her than anyone had and did a dangerous thing. He reached into his pocket and took out a wind chime tube, small, bone-white, carved with a loop I recognized. "You forgot this," he said. "It keeps trying to tell me a story." He held it out, and the coat leaned like a person offered a childhood toy. Her flute lowered a fraction. Mara's rose. I did not think. I moved. I tossed the wrong flute to Mara and grabbed the coat's wrist with both hands. Her skin was hot and dry as old paper left on a radiator. Under it, the bones felt slick, as if oiled. She looked at me like you look at a wasp that has landed on your lip. "Return," she said, and I said, "No." I said no like a prayer, like a hammer, like a word that could grow antlers. Mara's two flutes, my wrong one and her wrong one, sang together for the first time. The sound was not pretty. It was a saw through a frozen branch, a breath sobbing into a scarf, a church organ coughing before it finds the note. But it was honest. The coat's flute tried to braid with it and slipped. The chimes in the branches went still. The shadows of the trees thinned like smoke in a draft. The ground under the ring softened as if something below it had sighed. "Now," Mara said, and we pulled. Ropes bit palms. Salt stung cuts. Names made the air too thick for the wrong song to move through easily. One by one, feet came free like splinters from the skin of the park. The coat laughed, and the laugh was full of grief. "You will always be mine," she said, and the trees around the ring leaned in to hear her tell us how. "You carry doorways in your bones now. Wherever you go, there is an entrance." Sam's hand squeezed my wrist, and the squeeze said now, not later. We ran. We pulled who we could, carried who we couldn't, stumbled whoever could be stumbled. And the boy with the mud loped at our side like a stray dog who has chosen a new address. Behind us, the flutes ground against each other like knives in a drawer. The trees eased back into themselves. The chimes in the branches began to crumble from the top down, like sugar domes in rain. We did not look back. If a song knows it has been watched, it kisses harder. No one applauded when we came out of the park. It was too early, and the kind of victory we carried is not the kind that makes noise. The block watched as we lugged their missing, their tired, their muddy, their sleep-drunk down the middle of the street like a parade of waking. Kitchen lights flicked on in small explosions of home. We put them on porches, on rugs, on couches that had sighed without them. We salted their feet because it felt like a promise. We smeared soot in our door frames because it felt like a shield. We burned the last of the chimes in a trash can that used to hold birthday wrapping paper. The coat did not come to the curb. She stood at the edge of the park and watched us with her head tilted like a bird, listening to a watch. She did not play because now she knew our answer. But she smiled, and that was a promise too. Mara sat on our porch steps and held both wrong flutes in her lap like sleeping snakes. "We can't keep them," she said. "Not separately. They'll make a bridge." The boy with the mud nodded, as if listening to something under the asphalt. "The ground wants them," he said. "The ground wants everything. But we can ask it to forget for a while. How? I asked, because questions are a way to keep from crying. Feed it something else, he said. Something old that knows our names in the right direction. We dug in the strip of dirt between sidewalk and street because you are not supposed to dig there, and sometimes you must. We found the roots of the maple that has been losing its leaves late the last few years, and apologized to it with our hands. We made a place, not whole, not like the ring, not the shape of a foot, but a cradle. And we put the flutes in it, facing away from each other. We buried between them the things we could stand to lose. A copy of the house key that sticks in winter. A drawer handle that snapped 3 years ago. The first wind chime cord I had cut, which still smelled faintly of smoke. We poured water, because that's what you do when you don't know what else. And because the ground is a throat. Mara spoke names in the order we had said them hours before, then in reverse. The boy with the mud said nothing, and everything. Sam stood barefoot on the curb, toes gray with the memory of soil, and watched like a witness at a wedding she had almost missed. The ground took a breath. It settled. The flutes under it did not sing. The air over the block warmed 1/2 degree. Birds in the ginkgo forgot the song they had been about to sing and chose another. The coat in the park inclined her head the way you do at a funeral, where you are the only one who knows it is not over. She turned, and her coat rippled like a shadow stepping into a deeper shadow, and she went into the trees as if a door had opened that only she could see. The park exhaled and pretended it had been ordinary this whole time. Normal returned like a stray cat, warily, ready to bolt. The city sent crews to assess damage, though the damage was the kind you cannot inventory. They asked for statements, and we gave them the kind that can be typed. A reporter asked me if I had seen anything unusual, and I pointed to the hydrangeas and said, "They look good this year," which was true. At night, the block sleeps with its eyes open. We still smear soot in our doorframes. We still keep salt where the pretzels used to be. Some of us have scars around our ankles like bracelets. Some of us hear flutes when the wind wears the right jacket. The boy with the mud sits on the curb sometimes and looks at the maple, and I sit with him, and we do not speak in case speaking makes the door remember. Sam hums sometimes and stops and looks embarrassed, as if she had said someone else's name in a dream. On Sundays, she peels oranges slowly and asks if I think the ground is hungry today. I say yes, to be respectful. I say no, to be kind. I want the old noise back, I said at the beginning, and I have it in the dishwasher's sigh, in a skateboard clack, in the soft machine of the cat purring like a bicycle wheel. But underneath, there is another noise, a bass note that does not end. It says, "The things you love are made of things that also love the dark." We are careful now with what we hang in the wind. We do not let our doorways stay too clean. We keep our feet out of holes that look like they were made to fit us. We call each other by our names and mean them. Sometimes, between 3 and 5, I wake and stand on the porch and listen. The maples talk to the wind in leaf language, and the hydrants hiss to themselves, and the electrical box hums low like a tired choir. Far away, a train throws its long animal sound over the sleeping roofs, and once, I swear, under it all, I hear the slightest clink of bone on bone, and then nothing, like a threat cleared its throat and thought better of it. If a flute plays again, I will char my door and say our names, and pour water on the ground, and burn the teeth, and stand between it and the ones who walk in their sleep. If a flute plays again, I will ask the maple to remember us. If a flute plays again, I will not step forward. I will not step forward.